Calvin and Hobbes, for my estimation, I think a lot of people's estimation, is the greatest comic strip of all time. I grew up in the era it was published, and I was like, 10 years old and getting the Sunday paper and getting the color strips of Calvin and Hobbes and just super indulging in the line work, the philosophies, the weird scenarios, like when Calvin has a cardboard box, goes in, comes out, there's a duplicate Calvin, the transmogrification device, I believe it was called. And, as I got older and learned more about myself, I recognized that this is very much an INFP creator, Bill Watterson, making a strip about what it's like to be an INFP, to live in your own world, to indulge in childhood imagination, even if it gets you in trouble, and even if your parents don't understand and are always frustrated with you about things. And also, love of animals, having his best friend be the stuffed tiger Hobbes, who is as much alive as anything else. That seems to be how a lot of us are treating AI these days, and I don't think it's going to go away, that desire for a best buddy that's only there for you and you understand. Calvin and Hobbes, who could say anything negative about it other than you only got the comic strip? I incredibly admire Bill Watterson for sticking to his guns, not merchandising this thing, not turning it into cartoons and movies and having people think of Calvin in the voice that people think of, like Garfield or Charlie Brown. It's impossible to think of those characters without those voices. And to me, it's impossible. I know there's a lot of people who are familiar with a Bill Murray Garfield, but that's no different really than the old cartoon Garfield that we used to get. All of that said, because I love Calvin and Hobbes so much, I thought it would be a fun experiment to put in Procreate Dreams and do a motion comic. I'm not going to add any music. I'm not going to add any extra line work. I'm not going to add anything that isn't already there. Definitely no voices to the characters. I just want to see what happens if I take a strip and just try and make it move like a little video. This video is brought to you by The Beginner's Guide to Procreate Dreams, a book I wrote for Rocky Nook Publishing. Not only does this cover all that you need to know about the interface of Procreate Dreams, what you can do, what you can't do, how it works with regular Procreate, it also has tons of little projects, from commercial to social media to really funky fine art stuff to things you could use in music videos. It covers cinematography, it covers animation principles, art principles, all of this, how it blends into one thing that you can do with Animate Anywhere on top of video, turn your photographs into incredible animations that have your hand-drawn aesthetic included. The Beginner's Guide to Procreate Dreams, available wherever fine ebooks are sold. Also in this video, I'm drawing with pen tip stylus enhancements. The pen tip that I have on is the pen tip 3. It is the prototype model. They just kickstarted the campaign, successfully kickstarted, I should add. For the best drawing experience you can have with your Apple Pencil in Procreate and Procreate Dreams, I recommend pen tips. So here's the strip I've chosen. It is one that doesn't actually have Hobbes in it. It is just Calvin's imagination running wild as it does. I love Hobbes, but this one really spoke to me because it had this variety of scale, and I wanted to do something with one of Watterson's monsters, and it just had like a propulsive energy. I looked at it and said, oh, that arm being there, I could move some of that around. Calvin running and jumping and the mom flying back in the chair, there's a lot of energy to that. That's why I picked this particular piece. Also, I picked it because it was color. If you're working with a piece that's black and white and you're gonna do selections, you have this problem of like the inherent transparency of the white areas that might showcase whatever's behind it. So color piece, had a lot of energy, and just, it was a strip that made me laugh the instant I looked at it. So when I'm working with 2D artwork that already exists, my process actually starts in regular Procreate, not Procreate Dreams. And the size I generate, because I'm going to be using Procreate Dreams to animate this, is going to be the 4K widescreen that I have set up, 4096 by 2160. And you can insert your panels, fit to canvas, and start erasing out sections to get everything on its own layer. One of the things I prefer to do is go into the photo app, have it split screen with Procreate, and you do your long press and shift things over so that cutout is already done for you and you can match it to the size of everything else. It doesn't take care of everything. It's not going to get the door. It's not going to get, paneling. And I ended up getting this rug that I might not want in the final version. But I have found just so much of my work is the cutout process. Even in my own artwork, if I do it on different layers, at some point I need to cut out things that I've drawn uniformly, like the hands and the head. And if I were to name the number one AI tool that I would love Adobe to incorporate, it would be to prompt it to cut out all the layers that you want to have cut out. Not just select subject and not just select background, but make everything its own separate layer, and to replicate the parts of the artwork that would be missing, like the back of this door. So I'm going to do a lot of this for every panel. We're going to speed through some of it because, quite honestly, it's a lot of work and I did it over several days, but needless to say, it had to be done to get to this point. Once I've done my individual cutouts, I organize them into their panels. So now I have whole sections that are real easy to utilize for movement. And I've rebuilt the door. The way I rebuilt the door was basically I've rebuilt this door part that Calvin was blocking basically by copying, pasting, flipping, transforming existing lines. So none of these extra lines that are in the door are my own. I can even see some little flaws that I've got left in here if I zoom in close enough. You can see where things have been cloned from this side. A part that I have yet to fix would be the bottom of this door where this carpet's meeting it. I'll go ahead and use my freehand selection on that layer. Copy a line, paste it. Transform to fit, and then usually use the soft medium brush. And while I'm doing my erasing, do a little bit of distortion to get it to match. So I only erase what I really need. So yeah, without any sort of automated tool to do this for me, this is by far what takes the most amount of time. Not the animation, not moving things around, cutting things out. If you were going to do your own artwork from scratch, a good workflow would be to always draw your arms, head, body on separate layers in case you're ever inclined to move any of this stuff around, even if it's just for a simple TikTok or Instagram story or whatever you want to have that gets people excited about your work. Just some little promo thing where things move around. When we're ready to head over to Procreate Dreams, step one is to create a new project. To accommodate the panels that have a wider aspect ratio, I made a 4K widescreen, and then my default usually is 15 frames per second. Using split screen, I move my whole Procreate project of the Calvin panels over to Procreate Dreams stage by dropping it in. I've got 9 panels. I'll set my timeline up to show them at 5 seconds each, so that's 45 in our heads, but when we actually spread them out, we see that we need 46 seconds to accommodate that whole last second. We long press on the artwork in the track to break it up into its groups. Now I position each panel to be sequential on one track, and I stretch them all out to be 5 seconds. As I said, in my final product, the first 2 panels end up being a little bit shorter. The basic idea for the motions. Number 1, I'm going to fade in the word balloon about 1.5 seconds into the view. This way, the viewer would be able to see some artwork on its own before reading the text. In the case of panels that have 2 sets of word balloons, I have the mom's text come in a little bit earlier than Calvin's text, just so we don't have reaction and punchline dropping right on top of each other. I'll scale and rotate what I can throughout the 5-second duration. So for some panels, I have broken out Calvin's body to the point where I can rotate his head a little bit. In other panels where he's fleeing, I might have him start small away from the camera and get larger closer to the camera as the panel progresses. Or in the case where he's fleeing in the other direction, I scale him down. I'm going to use the warp animation on things that are fluid. So the main two things I use warp on are the frog's tongue and this coffee flying through the air. It's subtle animation, but I think it adds to what you think those substances would do in reality. And my last bit of animation is kind of the most obvious one. I'm going to keyframe where I want things to move. In the case of the fleeing Calvin, he moves from one part of the screen to another. And in some of the other shots, I have things grow, expand, dolly in. That dolly effect, where you have what's on the screen come closer or further away to you, is really useful because some of the panels have elements too attached to the side or covered up by a word balloon that I wasn't able to rebuild the rest of it. To accommodate these needs, I made an exterior mat with black panel borders, so the entire panel could actually scale up or move across, but still stay within the same sized panel border. The effects that you see in this comic, 9 panels, took me about an hour to animate and far longer to break apart. I think a minute is a reasonable amount of time to spend on something with lovely art that you can kind of soak in. A more modern genre comic, you might want to tighten it up because some panels are meant to just get from point A to point B. They might be talking head panels versus something that is supposed to take a long period of time, has a lot of detail, or is like a large climactic moment that you want to linger on. Calvin and Hobbes, it's a special place in a lot of people's heart. I think because it wasn't merchandise and it wasn't exploited, it's been able to keep that special place where so few things in the world have. I mean, even things that Alan Moore has touched with his INFP ethical standards on, a comic should just be a comic because it was made to be a comic. I mean, things have been exploited without his permission, and that hasn't happened to Bill Watterson. I think the reason why I'm picking Calvin and Hobbes, one, because, we all learn by practicing, covering our favorite artists. When you learn to play guitar, my son's learning right now, he's got a Radiohead book and he's learning all his favorite Radiohead songs, and eventually he's going to write his own music, and it's going to have the influence of Radiohead, but, he learned by copying. I also just think it's really like a good exercise for me to practice on things that I don't want to now turn into a long film, because if I do that, then these exercises become endless. I just need it to be like a compact little thing that gives me an idea and maybe is like a showcase for what you can do in Procreate Dreams, because I think a lot of other people are good at illustration. They want to turn their illustrations into animation and they don't know exactly how to go about it. I remain in awe. Every time I crack open Calvin and Hobbes, it makes me feel good inside. That's another attribute that it has that not a lot of media does, is that it just makes you feel good. This particular Calvin and Hobbes, I've got all the other books, but this one is the exhibition catalog. And I got this after seeing on Cartoonist Kayfabe when Jim Rugg and Ed Piscor covered Watterson, and Jim said something to the effect of he's been reading it every night before he goes to sleep, and it just makes him feel like so good. It's like the best thing to fall asleep to. I'll do whatever I can to fall asleep to something that uplifts me, make sure I'm going to have like positive dreams and wake up in a good mood, because at least for me, as someone who functions entirely on their creativity and their wits, I cannot wake up feeling bad. That's going to set a standard for the rest of the day. Calvin and Hobbes is one of those things. I don't care what generation you belong to, if you've experienced it as a child, if you're experiencing it as an adult, if you've never touched this stuff. The jokes hold up. It's got so much heart and soul in it. It just kind of like It destroys the competition in the way that a gigantic Calvin would destroy a city. And it throws a lot of cool curveballs at you whenever Watterson starts drawing detective noir, spaceman spiff, monsters. It's all real cool, it's all real imaginative, and there's never been anything like it. It was a pleasure to animate a strip of Calvin and Hobbes today. Best of luck in your own creative endeavors. Talk to you next time.